Hey everyone, welcome back to the Alive Method. Today we're going to look at a full chapter of wisdom literature. That's going to be Psalms, Proverbs, Song of Solomon, but we're looking at Proverbs today. And you might start reading through Proverbs 3 and wonder, how are all of these little thoughts going to fit together? But remember, when you open your scripture in faith, you're going to encounter God. You can read through this passage expecting that by faith, God will lead you to the verses or the area of this chapter for you to focus on. But before we do that, we're just going to work through our method as we usually do. So let's get started. The first question is always, what does it say? And as I look at this chapter, I hone in on verse 1. It says, never forget the things that I've taught you. So I know, okay, this is going to be a teaching, and I want to look for some connective elements through this chapter that help me sort of understand the general themes. I'm wondering, are these commands? Are these unconditional statements? What am I going to learn from this? And even though I know I can't take in all of this knowledge in this short time frame, I can sort of underline phrases that are sticking out to me today. And as I read through the chapter, I notice that wisdom is repeated multiple times throughout this passage. So I decided to write down an overview of an outline of kind of where wisdom is appearing. So chapter 3, verse 1 through 6 is an overview. 7 through 12, I write down how to embrace God's wisdom. Verses 13 through 26 are the benefits of wisdom. And then at the end, sort of the actions that a wise person takes. So now that I've done an overview of the chapter, I know what it says, and I can start to ask what's the backstory here and hone in on a few details that might help me understand. So I'm going to look at the book of Proverbs in the introduction. And there I find that it says that Proverbs offer principles that are generally true. So now I'm thinking, okay, they're not always true. This isn't an unconditional statement, but this is kind of life direction, ways that I can live my life and how they're kind of going to turn out. And that can be helpful as I'm reading. I also start to notice where this chapter talks about peace, and that my cross reference says that shalom means peace in Hebrew. And I decided I'm going to look up peace in my concordance and record a few scriptures that might help me understand what it looks like to plan peace, as it says in chapter 3. I see that in Matthew, it says that God blesses those who work for peace. In Romans 8, it says, let the Spirit control your mind for a mind of peace. And 1 Corinthians 14, that God is not a God of disorder, but a God of peace. So now that I've got that on my mind, I'm asking, what does it mean? And I know that I don't have to do a ton of interpreting to understand the principles here, because this whole book is basically a book of principles. But I am going to ask God to lead me to the principle that He has for me today from this whole chapter. So don't worry about getting this wrong. You're just writing down theories that you're testing out in Scripture. As you add to your knowledge, you'll add to your confidence that you understand what God is saying to you through Scripture. So here's a few that stood out to me today. The first is this: by letting the Spirit of God control my thoughts and actions, I will experience deep joy and satisfaction. The second is trusting, seeking, and honoring God are all required to experience God's wisdom rather than my own. And then the final one is that God's discipline is for our correction and comes from love. That's in verses 11 and 12. So I'm not going to apply all of those, but I am going to go to question 4 and say, okay, what does this mean for me? It's an easy leap to apply this to my life. And I'm going to look at what I've written down and ask, how can I seek God's wisdom rather than my own today? How can I actually lean into God's understanding rather than my own? And so with these words that I've learned sort of in my heart now, I can enter into my day with a sense of expectation and joy, knowing God is with me. I can lead into my day saying, today is the day that I don't want to lean into my own understanding, but I want to lean into God's way. And then all through the day, I can look for those corrections to get back on course and continue to experience God's peace rather than my own. It's as easy as that. I'll see you guys tomorrow.